welcome to Talking City. I'm James Robson, Manchester City editor for the Manchester Evening News. With me is Ian Cheeseman, long-time City commentator, now with XS Manchester. We're going to be talking about the big game against Chelsea this weekend, how on earth City are going to fill the void left by Benjamin Mendy, and just what forward line Pep Guardiola is going to play on Saturday. Well, I asked Pep Guardiola on Tuesday if he knew what his best attack was, because this season, we've seen City just absolutely annihilate teams, haven't they? With a revolving cast of forwards. You know,
great way of putting it. Yeah.
He leaves out. Thank you. He leaves out Sterling, brings him back in, scores 2 goals. He leaves out Sane, scores 3 goals in a week. He says he doesn't know what his best attack is. He says he sleeps easily because he just knows he's got 5 or 6 great strikers, he calls them. I don't think we would call them all strikers, would we? In short, what is his best attack?
If he doesn't know, that's good, because that means the opposition don't know either. So whilst we can try and guess what sort of team he's going to put out and how he's going to line them up, I think I said this to you quite early on in the season, you know, that writing down a formation, regardless of the personnel, a formation now, it's almost redundant under Pep Guardiola. So when he talks about strikers, and you know, in your head straight away you go, well, Gabriel Jesus and Sergio Aguero, the 2 strikers. You don't think that way anymore. You know, you think in terms of all these attacking midfielders. And he has said, Pep, in press conferences, that he doesn't necessarily see it as being one or the other or a pair, and that sometimes he might play with a false 9 and actually name neither of them. So, you know, there are so many different permutations, and what he will be doing now is thinking about this Chelsea game and thinking what can he do that's a little bit different that they're not expecting. Now, almost by definition, because of what you've said, they don't know what to expect anyway, just like we don't know what to expect. And maybe right now, as we're recording this, Pep actually hasn't decided yet, and it might depend on, you know, who's fully fit. There might be little niggles and things like that. But all of these players that are in attacking midfield roles can score goals, even down to the principally deep line Fernandinho. We know he can hit them. Every time he's anywhere near the edge of the box, the crowd are going shoot, shoot, and he has actually got a very good shot on him. So they can come from anywhere. What he's going to do at Chelsea, I'm not quite sure. I mean, what do you think?
Well, I look at that attack, and I think there's 4 players who you can't drop, and at best, I think he can only play 3. So therefore,
who are the 4 then?
So the 4 right now you can't drop, I would say, are Aguero, obviously, Gabriel Jesus, even though he didn't have a good game the other night, Sane and Sterling. So
he'll drop one of them.
I would think so, unless he surprises us all and goes with 2 wingers, let's say. Then you've got Sane and Sterling as wingers, but they've looked at their best really not playing that way, haven't they, this season? I wouldn't be surprised if one of Jesus or Aguero were dropped. I say I wouldn't be surprised just because it's Guardiola, and who knows what he's going to do from one week to the next. What we do know is it will not be the same team that played Shakhtar, because he never names the same team twice, does he? But so I would see maybe, and again this is unthinkable because Aguero's got a great record against Chelsea, hasn't he? He's got a great record against everyone, hasn't he? Yeah. But I wouldn't be entirely surprised if it was Gabriel Jesus up front and Sane and Sterling around him. But then you're leaving out Bernardo Silva, who also looks great.
Well, Chelsea play in a particular way, don't they? And although you've got Hazard, who ostensibly is a winger but does tend to drift in and run at the heart of defences. I know they've got Moses on one side as well, who's probably the most out and out wide man, and you've got Alonso as an attacking fullback, but I still see Chelsea principally as quite a compact side, so that makes me think that City will try and use width on the counter-attack. Now, without Mendy, which would have been part of that armoury, therefore you need something with pace on the left-hand side, and if he's going to sit Fabian Delph at left-back, which I think he will, then Sane surely has to start that game. He's like almost the first name on the sheet, because automatically you've got Kyle Walker on the right, so you don't necessarily have to have Sterling raiding down the right-hand side. And I don't think he'll want to have two out and out wingers, because then you're losing, the numbers in central midfield where Chelsea are very strong. So my feeling is that Sterling will be the one that's left out. Sane will play on the left-hand side. Now, whether he plays two up front or one, my guess is, and it is purely a guess, is that actually Aguero might be the one who gets the nod. But you're right, one or the other, maybe on their own. I don't see him playing both and then compacting the midfield, with the quality that they've got. Whether Gundogan's ready to play 90 minutes or be a starter in that game, it's a pity that he isn't, if he isn't, because Gundogan is such a quality player and I'd love to see him in there. I think playing against Chelsea would suit him as well and suit Pep's team.
But then we'd have a whole other argument of who he leaves out for Gundogan. Because
if you're leaving Jesus or Aguero out, you've made that space that way, haven't you?
So then you're leaving out Bernardo Silva.
Yes.
Because I think he looks at Gundogan as really an alternative to De Bruyne or David Silva at the moment. I think he considers those the three attacking midfielders. Bernardo Silva more as one of his forward players, let's say. And right now you couldn't... Well, he'll never drop David Silva, will he?
You wouldn't have thought so, no.
And you could not drop De Bruyne the way he's playing, could you?
Certainly not in these games.
So,
you wouldn't drop him, you'd rest him.
Whatever you want to call it, you wouldn't do it.
No, not against Chelsea.
is what I'm saying. So I think I would be surprised, even if fully fit, if Gundogan played in that game, because I just don't see where.
Well, if you played the one up front, that's how you accommodate him potentially. And I wonder if Bernardo Silva might be considered for that reason as a player who can then make it more competitive in the central midfield area, and you sacrifice Sterling, who's playing very well at the moment, particularly as an impact substitute. And whilst he, there's been a lot of criticism of him, and I've seen both sides of this argument. Sterling is getting goals. Quite a few of them have been relatively tap-ins, but nevertheless, you've got to be in the right place at the right time. But what Sterling offers, and this could be the role he plays at Chelsea, is that 60 minutes, 70 minutes into a game, when you've had this relative stalemate, because I suspect it'll be quite a low-scoring game, and decided maybe by one goal, that Sterling comes on and he's like a wild card. I don't think sometimes even he knows what he's going to do. I'm not saying exactly like Paolo Wanchop, but Paolo Wanchop was one of those players who you thought, what is he going to do? And his legs went one way and he went the other way. Sterling isn't, at the moment, I think Pep sees him as a project to try and make him integrate more and do what he wants him to do. But at the moment, he's not part of this slick passing movement stuff, because Sterling, quite often, frankly, gives the ball away in those situations. But what he is he's a wild card. He's what is he going to do? Where's he going to run? Just charging at the opposition, particularly if they're tiring a little bit, will unsettle them. And you could make an argument to say that Alonso is such a key player for Chelsea, with Sterling on the field, then his wings are clipped a little bit.
He's the last thing, as a defender, you want to see coming off the bench, isn't he?
Yeah.
With 15 or 20 minutes left, you'd be thinking, what on earth? Because he is so fast, isn't he?
If Gabriel Jesus starts on the bench, though, he's another one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Or if Aguero starts on the bench.
Yeah.
That's the brilliance, isn't it, this season? And it's kind of proven our point, isn't it, that there's so many options, and whoever doesn't start, you're always going to be looking at the bench. I suppose the game against Shakhtar in midweek, when City weren't taking the chances, they were creating loads but not taking them, you were just thinking, well, you can throw someone else on.
The bench is so strong at the moment. I mean, we're all forgetting Yaya Toure. Now, I know he's not an impact player and he's not quite doing these lung busting runs and with goals at the end of them that he used to do, but he can still be a big influence, even coming off the bench. And you know how much the crowd love him as well, and I'm a huge fan of Yaya Toure. So to have the bench that is inevitably going to be sitting there, whoever's on it, is just phenomenal. Chelsea's bench, I don't believe will be anywhere near as strong as City's bench.
I don't think there are many in the league that are as strong as City's bench.
No, they're not.
You'd probably say United maybe. They've both got a similar sort of thing, haven't they, where they can throw on all sorts of attacking players to change things. Is that something Guardiola has brought in? Has he changed, I suppose, in a way, the English football, and this idea of just having 5, 6 attackers it was always the old thing of 4 strikers, wasn't it? He's taken that to another level, hasn't he?
Yeah, and it's brilliant to watch, isn't it? And of course he was quoted recently as saying that if it was up to him, rather than just have 3 substitutes per game, he'd use more. I don't know how I feel about that, but I understand why he says it, because mobility and energy and spring.
He's trying to keep people happy as well.
Yeah, there's that. Absolutely,
And
that's
there's
part of
also,
it.
he can then go to his bosses and say, I need even more players.
Yeah, maybe that's all true. But I think underneath it all, the fact that he can sort of only use players for 60 minutes at a time, so therefore they're always at their peak within that 60 minutes, because physically, I mean, I don't know what it's like for you, James, but certainly when I go to the gym, as I will be doing shortly, I know that after a certain amount of time, your performance dips. And joking apart, footballers are still human beings, and no matter how well trained they are, their performance can dip late on in games. And to actually have the flexibility to be able to take off a player who's not necessarily out on his feet, and fans will say, well, they only play for 90 minutes and train a bit. It's playing at an intensity, and it's also the concentration levels of trying to play the way Pep wants. And City play not in an instinctive way, not lumping the ball up route one. They play in such an inventive way that mentally that must be quite tiring, really.
We're going off at a bit of a tangent, but
maybe. But
I we're free to do that, aren't we?
Let's go on a tangent.
I think, if you were doing that, I think it would be very unfair. You'd create more of a gap between the rich and the not so rich, because, of course, City and a certain number of clubs could just fill their team, or their squad, with loads of players, knowing they could change 5 players a game or something. If your only chance, if you're, let's say, a Burnley or someone like that, is to keep tight, maybe get something out of this. If the bigger clubs with all the money in the world can suddenly throw on another world-class player, more than they already can, I think we would probably be creating
so this
divide.
Can of worms here now.
Yes.
You're opening up a completely new one.
But going back to the forward line, he will play. I could see Bernardo Silva potentially playing, in terms of, like you say, it could be a compact game, and maybe you need those really intelligent players, because he'll find a gap anywhere, won't he?
That's why I don't think he'll play the 2 strikers up front together. I think it's one or the other. Who it'll be, who knows?
If you were picking,
I'd pick Aguero. You'd pick Gabriel Jesus. I think it'll be one or the other. I can't see the 2 of them together. But Pep's a much cleverer man, than I am, and that's his life. That's why he's paid so much money.
When he goes one up front, he tends to pick Jesus, doesn't he? I know he didn't midweek, but I saw that. No, he did. Sorry, he did midweek. He didn't against Crystal Palace. I saw that more a case of resting him for the midweek game.
And they both came off in the game against Shakhtar, and Jesus came off first. So therefore, you could argue, even though you said he had a disappointing game, and when he came off, Jesus' body language is quite down. And then the manager, Pep Guardiola, went into a big routine of giving him the old slap on the face and the cuddle and everything, as if to say, I haven't took you off because you're playing badly. I've took you off because there's a big game. And if we could have earwigged on that conversation, maybe that's the conversation that was happening. But both of them should be relatively fresh. So whichever one he goes with should work. Me, personally, I'd go with Aguero.
Well, at the time of recording, we're yet to get the final results on Benjamin Mendy's tests, which he's undergone in Barcelona with the renowned surgeon Ramon Cugat, who is Pep Guardiola's favourite surgeon. So, at the moment, we're hoping for the best news, but everything we're hearing from City, from Guardiola really, on Tuesday when we were talking to him, was that this sounds like a bad injury. It sounds like he's going to be out for months rather than weeks.
It was like there's a little bit of the Gundogan injury here, and when he went off Mendy, there was no way you could know how serious it was, and it was the same deal really with Gundogan, and we saw how long he was out for. I know fans, and I include myself in this, hate speculation that's driven by guesswork. So for us to guess what the outcome of it's going to be is a little unfair. So you can only talk about the fear, and the impact that he's made as a player has been enormous. I think more than that, he's a great personality as well. And I'm not just talking about the Twitter stuff, because I was at the press conference on Tuesday and asked Kyle Walker about this sort of banter that they have and the nutmeg stuff and all the rest of it. And at that time, obviously, we didn't know the extent of Mendy's injury. We still don't, but now fearing worse. And Kyle Walker was full of the banter and, yeah, I'm waiting to get him back. But now that it's moved on, that seems less appropriate. But the fact that he is a big personality, and that not only is he a driving force, and he's just a unit. I mean, it's like almost like watching, Linford Christie or somebody like that, or somebody really powerful running down the flank. He's just a great driver of the team. So to miss him is a big loss.
Well, you say you don't like the speculation. The reason why there is speculation is because he's already shown how important he is to this side, hasn't he? You look at Walker, Mendy, Danilo, they've transformed City, haven't they? To bring in those fullbacks, they're so important to Guardiola, aren't they? And the very fact that City are scoring so many goals, he puts down to them, doesn't he? Because Sané's in the central position, Sterling is. They're in areas where they can score goals more rather than being out wide. But I suppose the speculation, it does come from having, you've watched football for many years, so have I. When managers talk about things like it could be months, when what was initially described as a minor injury suddenly ends up with him having to go to a renowned surgeon, the surgeon that players go to when they've got serious injuries, that's why we are fearing the worst, isn't it?
I understand it. I mean, I did a Facebook Live after the last press conference, and everybody's asking you about what's the extent of this injury. They're insatiable because they care.
Yeah.
Because they care. Yeah. They want to know the outcome. They think that we're going to suddenly jump ahead and know before everybody else. The fact is that if Mendy's going to a specialist in Barcelona, the first person that's going to know is Mendy. The second, maybe the specialist, and then the next people are going to be Pep Guardiola and the club. They're not going to ring up me or you, as much as we'd like them to, and say, this is the situation. They don't keep it secret at City. To be fair, they're quite open about stuff once the information is out there. But it's just frustrating. It's just like if I go to the doctors or the dentist and they do some test on me, I've got to wait for the outcome of the results. So, yeah, very frustrating. But as I say, he's a big character. Now, the other night, Fabian Delph went in at left back. Now, I must admit, just like everybody else, I was a little bit sceptical about that and thought, is this going to work? And I thought he was tremendous. Now, albeit this was against the Shakhtar Donetsk team that didn't really have, in my opinion, a massive threat coming down City's left-hand side. So defensively, perhaps he wasn't tested. And going forward, Delph plays in a different way than Mendy would do. Mendy's all about pace and power and driving down that left-hand side, whereas we saw Delph dropping more centrally. A bit like when Pep first came in and we were talking about Clichy and Zabaleta. So even within the first couple of games, the pundits were noticing that these two were coming into a more central position, and that's what Delph was doing. So we're going to see something else from Delph if it's him. Zinchenko's another name that's been mentioned. Now he's only a kid and he's yet to make his debut.
And he's a winger.
Yes, but then you can almost look at Mendy sometimes and think, is he a winger or is he a fullback?
Well, he plays his fullbacks as wingers, doesn't he?
Yeah.
But there is in those players that defensive mind, isn't there? We saw this season in the one game that he played Leroy Sané as a wing back.
Didn't work.
Because he's a winger.
Yeah.
He's not. Whereas here he's got wing backs who are first and foremost defenders, which just so happens they're brilliant attackers, aren't they? And I think, I take your point, I think Delph was brilliant on Tuesday, so did Guardiola. But he's built this team now around those two wing-backs. And just because Delph can fill a void, it doesn't solve the problem, does it? Because you don't spend £100 million on two players just to have it filled in with a player who, frankly, you were willing to sell in the summer. That would be my big concern there. This team has been built on not making compromises. You spend £100 million not to make a compromise, don't you? Not to stick a midfielder in there. And I just think it's going to be a huge loss, him not being there.
Without doubt, without doubt. I mean, it's already hinted, Pep, from what I can see, that maybe in January they're going to look at this again if Mendy is going to be a long-term injury. And I can understand why they're doing that, because there's not an obvious candidate. Why would there be? Because, as you said, they've gone out and bought a headliner, the one that they want to play every week, in every game for the next few years, and suddenly that's gone out the window. The same thing would actually happen if something happened to Kyle Walker, who I've been really impressed with. I mean, he hasn't got quite the headlines that Mendy's got, or perhaps some of the other players have got, but obviously we've seen him play for Tottenham in the past, and I've always thought he was a good player. But I tell you what, when you watch him, close up for 90 minutes rather than watch highlights or whatever and watch it on the TV, as I would have mainly have done, I can't tell you how impressed by Kyle Walker I am. What an athlete he is, how fast he is, and his decision making in tight situations, very, very good. And he's a strong player. He's not shrugged off it. He makes challenges, recovery challenges that are very impressive too. You know what though, that this is a player that has caused a lot of controversy among City fans in terms of what they've said about him, and I've been critical of him in the past as well. But I wonder if Eliaquim Mangala could be converted in, if he has to be, into that left-sided driving player.
It's a big shout.
It is a big shout. I mean, the fear I have about him and the weakness he's always had to me is positionally, that he's wandered out of position. There's no doubt that he's an athlete. There's no doubt that he's strong, that he can do recovery runs. Now, Pep is the greatest coach in the world, allegedly, and I'm with that view, by the way. So I'm saying other people say allegedly. I wonder, because we're hearing that maybe Zinchenko's a candidate, if Pep is working behind the scenes now in the next few weeks with somebody like Mangala, somebody like Zinchenko, and then suddenly metaphorically pulls a rabbit out of the hat and something you couldn't see coming happens, because not everybody would have automatically gone, well, Delph will fill in there at left back. Not everybody would have thought that Philipp Lahm at Bayern Munich would have become a midfielder. And when Fernandinho first came into the City team, not everybody would have thought that Pep would play him perhaps as he's playing him at the moment instead of Yaya Toure. I wonder whether there might be something like that happens, and there'll be people watching this who say, Mangala at left, you're being ridiculous. Well, maybe I am, and maybe it won't happen, but
you said it.
I'm just saying, you never know.
I take your point with that. What I would say though is that the examples of like Philipp Lahm, take your point there, the example of Mascherano at Barcelona, he does those sort of things. I think there's a common denominator with those though, in that they're wonderfully gifted footballers, and with the greatest respect to Mangala, he is a fairly basic defender, and that's Guardiola's biggest problem with him.
You can teach that though. You can teach that as a coach. Yes.
At this stage,
if you've got the physical, he's only young.
He is, but is he going to turn him? He's not particularly happy with his ability on the ball. Is he going to turn him into a wing back? He did play him at left back on tour. He did do that. I'll give you that.
I'm not saying that Mangala's suddenly going to be the new Mendy. I'm saying that given the circumstances that they're in, certainly up till Christmas, as an experiment, as something in one of the games against so-called weaker teams, it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't try it. Now, if he tried it and it failed, or that wasn't his game, then fair enough. But there's a lot of games. There's a squad rotation system. Even if Mendy was playing, there'd be games that he would miss because of the intensity of the football, and especially the two fullbacks, the way they play. So I always wondered what would happen when Mendy was missing anyway. So maybe this is part of something that could happen, but who knows? Danilo
is the obvious choice, isn't he? But
suits the right so much more, though, doesn't he?
He does, but again, he's just a footballer, isn't he? So he can do a job there. But as we were saying before, you don't want someone who can do a job. Guardiola doesn't want someone who can just do a job. And also, it still leaves them light because you've only got two fullbacks who are going to have to play every 3 days, and that's a lot to ask of them, isn't it? I think the interesting thing for me is when you look at Mangala and you look at Delph, how important they've become as two players who, frankly, with hours left of the transfer window, City were still quite happy to let go. And all of a sudden, Mangala is the next in line at centre-back, might be the next in line at left-back, according to you, but also, and Delph is suddenly the important left-back, isn't it? it shows how quickly these things can change, doesn't
Absolutely, it all changes in the blink of an eye. An injury or something like that can make a big difference. And Delph, came in, before really the Pep Guardiola era, and Pep sort of probably looks at certain players as his players, and there's, you'd like to think they can see beyond that, but there is always that. I'm sure that he's one of mine type of thing, and he's also suffered quite a lot of injuries. And whilst it's lovely to see him playing at the moment and with a spring in his step, and I mean that both metaphorically and literally, because he does play with a spring in his step, and he's a player who seems to enjoy playing with a smile on his face. You want him to do well, but you're always in the back of your mind a little bit like Vincent Kompany, thinking, is there injury around the corner? It's inevitable. I mean, it happened with Gundogan as well. He came back after that long period out. The City signed him injured, and now every time you watch him take the field, and every time he goes into a contact, you think, please don't come out of this limping or something. So you wonder whether Delph, somewhere in the future, and that's when you really then, if he's going to be the new left back, that's when you really got a problem. If Mendy's out long term, Delph suddenly in the next game at Chelsea or whatever limps off, then you think, blimey, what's going to happen now?
The thing with Delph is he's just a footballer, isn't he? He's a good footballer. That's why you stick him at left back, he'll do a job. You stick him in midfield, he'll do a job either attacking or defensively. I think you're probably right. It's probably his injury record that has made Guardiola so uncertain about him, because otherwise he seems like an ideal Guardiola player in terms of the fact that he's versatile. He's very
possession well.
He's very good. Technically, he's a really good player, isn't he? Mm-hmm. And I always find Guardiola, after Delph plays, I remember the game when he threw him in against Chelsea last year, if you remember, the away game, and everyone was like, what on earth is he doing here? And afterwards, even Guardiola himself said, maybe I've not been fair on him. I didn't appreciate just how good he is. And there was that, we kind of heard that again, didn't we, on Tuesday after the game, how well he played. He keeps being surprised by him, so maybe he will just be that jack in the box, that surprise.
It's a great opportunity for Fabian Delph, a great opportunity.
It's a bit Milner-ish, would you say?
I was going to say, Ian Brightwell from an earlier era, he's one of those versatile players who can, slot in. I mean, Gareth Barry, in theory, could have done that as well, although principally played in central midfield. And Delph does seem to fit that. And Pep also waxed lyrical about the flexibility of players is something he really likes. So, I mean, we're going to talk a little later on about strikers, and when you're talking about players, up front, they're very, very versatile in the way that they're playing. So you can see it all over the pitch. I mean, City have even got a goalkeeper who could play at centre forward, I'm sure. So it is about having that awareness of other positions and being able to be flexible.
Well, you heard it here first. Mangala is the new Mendy, and Delph is the new Philip Lahm.
It's a typical journalist there, misquoting me, but yeah.